It wasn't so long ago when India was basically the country every other country was looking at and looking to. But suddenly we're seeing a massive geopolitical shift. China certainly has always engaged Pakistan, but there's a shift in the United States of America since Trump came in for the second time. And there's massive engagement with Islamabad, or particularly Rawalpindi. Why is that really happening? Why has Pakistan become so important in South Asia? To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by Michael Kugelman. He's Senior Fellow, Asia Pacific Foundation. Michael, thank you so much for doing this.
Good to be here with you. Thanks.
Let's begin with the fact that there is a new $3.4 billion loan rollover that China has announced for Pakistan. And we understand the importance of Pakistan for China, but there's an increasing importance that Washington, D.C. is showing when it comes to Pakistan, Islamabad, Rawalpindi engaging Asim Munir. Why is that?
Yeah, we know that so many Pakistan watchers in Washington and beyond are still trying to get a sense as to what's going on here. And I think that what it really comes down to is that Pakistan, its civilian and its military leadership, have been very successful at getting the attention of this Trump administration, which is, of course, a very unconventional and unorthodox administration, particularly in terms of how it looks at foreign policy and in terms of how it looks at relations with allies and partners. So what Pakistan has done is it has appealed to this administration by tapping into the most pressing interest, the most passionate interest that this administration has when it comes to foreign affairs, and that includes things like critical minerals, as well as cryptocurrency. So Pakistan had this major investment forum in Pakistan a few weeks ago focused on critical minerals, and it got a senior U.S. government presence there. Pakistan has also been able to tap into the personal and familial links in the Trump administration for its advantage. So, for example, Pakistan is now engaging with a crypto company that has Trump's sons as a part of it. And as a result, that company has actually signed some deals with Pakistan's new crypto council. And I think that Pakistan knows that for Trump, family is very important. And, that seems to have worked. And it's led to other things, such as, among other things, this very surprising meeting that the army chief had with President Trump at the White House some days ago. So I wouldn't say this is a major shift in relations, but it certainly is a lot different than what I think many of us expected to see with this relationship in the second Trump era.
Well, absolutely, Michael, because we're also trying to understand what's really happening. How has such a major shift taken place, and why is New Delhi placed where it is placed? We'll talk about that. But before that, is this just crony capitalism, or there is some strategic importance that Trump advisors are attaching to engaging Pakistan?
I mean, it's very hard to identify strategic convergences between the U.S. and Pakistan that exceed those of the U.S. and India. I mean, the very fact that Pakistan has this ironclad military alliance with China, America's top strategic competitor, I mean, that in of itself, I think, highlights the limits to strategic convergence and partnership between the U.S. and Pakistan. But I do think that there is more. It's not just crony capitalism. I think there's more to it than that. I mentioned critical minerals, I mentioned cryptocurrency. There's a third C that I'll put out there, and that is counterterrorism. I mean, it's very clear that this administration in Washington does think that Pakistan can be helpful to an extent in a limited context with helping secure U.S. interests. And we now know that Pakistan helped the U.S. track down a terrorist, an Islamic State terrorist that, according to the U.S., was involved in that horrific attack in Kabul during the withdrawal when you had some U.S. troops that were killed. So I think that there is that's one area. That's sort of like what I would describe as a policy convergence, though a limited one. That's a bit separate from these other things that I'm mentioning. But I do think it's true. I do think it's true to acknowledge that for this administration, when it looks at foreign policy, it is through a fundamentally transactional lens, one that includes looking at business opportunities in a very fundamental sense. And again, I think Pakistan has picked up on that and it's exploited that very adroitly.
All right. How much of an importance would you attach to Tehran and Afghanistan, that those policies matter and Pakistan sits right in the middle?
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to Iran, I mean, many people have noted that the army chief was in Washington, at the very moment when the war was raging and the U.S. was in the process of laying out its approach. But I think that Pakistan is not that significant player. I mean, it is in that it shares a border with Iran, and General Munir, or pardon me, Field Marshal Munir had been part of a large delegation of Pakistani officials that had been in Iran just a few weeks earlier. And so, in that sense, the U.S. might see Pakistan as useful in that regard. And one reason why the president might have been keen to meet with Munir is that he thought he could try to get a sense from Munir as to what the Iranians told him, what their views are, that type of thing. But I would say this, that even though we now know that the U.S. ended up launching limited strikes on Iran and its nuclear facilities, generally speaking, the U.S. and Pakistan have similar, the Trump administration and Pakistan have similar views on the Iran crisis of recent weeks. That there was a desire to have de-escalation. Yes, the U.S. attacked Iran, but that was limited. In my sense, is that Trump never wanted there to be a war in Iran to start with, and he was really looking for de-escalation. And that's, of course, the exact position that the Pakistanis have said. On the Afghanistan issue, there. As I said before, CT counterterrorism could be a convergence between the U.S. and Pakistan in a limited sense, in the sense that the U.S. would hope that Pakistan can help the U.S. track down terrorists. On the Afghanistan border, on the Pakistan side, terrorists that have threatened and that have targeted Americans in the past.
Well, what's your reading on how Washington, D.C. is looking at New Delhi? Is that one of the reasons why the souring of ties between India and the United States of America after Operation Sindoor, and the fact that India did not give Donald Trump credit for the ceasefire that he claims he brokered between the two countries, as opposed to what Pakistan did? Immediately came out and gave him credit, in fact, has nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Trump administration, including Trump himself, genuinely want a partnership, a strong partnership with India. You have a lot of champions of partnership with India in this relationship, and that's why I don't think we should let the events of recent days make us think that this administration is taking a different tack. I think you had a convergence of developments that simply benefited Pakistan, but were not meant from a U.S. perspective to alienate India. So, for example, and this gets back to the personal dimensions of Trump himself. He's someone that likes to be seen as the ultimate deal maker, the ultimate peace broker. So he wanted to take credit for a U.S. role in the ceasefire. He wanted to make that very public, not realizing or not caring that for India, this is a very sensitive issue, and that India does not want the US or any other country to be talking about external mediation. He did not mean to upset India by doing that, but I think that he was focused on his own personal goals and motivations in that regard, but that trumped everything. The same with his most recent comment about Kashmir. He doesn't necessarily want that. He may not realize or he may not care that by bringing attention to this idea of a Kashmir resolution, that's something that would not be received well in New Delhi. He wants to be the person. I think he's intrigued by the intractability of what he sees as the intractability of that dispute, and he wants to be seen as the guy that can try to fix it, so to speak. Clearly, that's where you'd have to hope that there would be his aides, his advisors would prevail on him and make very clear in due course that that's just not a good tack to take to if you want to ensure that the relationship with India stays in a good place.
Um, is there other options that India should be looking at, given the volatility in relations over here and how things are changing so drastically, so fast with Washington D.C. in ensuring that India diversifies, engages other countries rather than putting all its eggs in the American basket?
But I think that India's already been doing a good job of that. I mean, just because of its fundamental foreign policy strategy of strategic autonomy. I mean, that entails being flexible, and I think we've seen that. We've seen just in recent weeks, recent months, India's been able to ease tensions to an extent with China to allow for a bit more engagement, which could entail additional types of commercial cooperation. India has managed to ease tensions with Canada. In recent weeks, Canada, of course, is, I think, one of the only Western states that has not had good relations with India recently. And meanwhile, India continues, I think, to maintain very strong positive relations with countries across the West, particularly in Europe, as well as across the global South as well. So I don't think there's an issue there. I really think that things with the U.S. will be okay. I don't want to downplay the concerns right now, but as you know, there is a very significant negotiation going on between the U.S. and India on a trade deal, and they will. I think that they will get to a deal, to a first phase deal soon enough. Assuming you get that, that I think could be a big confidence building measure for the relationship at a moment when it could really use a boost, and I think that could help. Of course, your external affairs minister, Dr. Jai Shankar, is in Washington this week for a Quad foreign ministers meeting. I think that that type of thing can amplify for the two sides that there are continued and very deep strategic convergences and policy convergences between the two. And I think it's those things, among others, that can keep the relationship going. It's very strategically sound at the end of the day, even when you have these obstacles that have cropped up in recent weeks.
Michael, some experts say that Pakistan is too flexible and is the reason why we are seeing it engage US and China. And let me explain why. Because they're okay selling their rare earth minerals, cutting deals with both the sides, giving access to areas and to resources that many countries wouldn't, in many ways than one, almost compromising on their own strategic autonomy.
I mean, Pakistan is looking for friends. It needs friends, and it has some very significant, powerful friends like China and the Saudis and other states in the Gulf, and indeed the U.S. And Turkey. But it's looking for more. So in that sense, one would not be surprised that it would want to try to the extent that it can, balance relations with different powers to the extent that it can. But yeah, I think that we have to be realistic here. Pakistan's relationship with China is much stronger than its relationship with the US. And the trajectory is much stronger. For all the talk in recent months about tensions in Pakistan-China relations over Chinese concerns about security risks in Pakistan, at the end of the day, it's a deep alliance. And I think we got a reminder of that in the recent Pakistan-India conflict when, of course, Pakistan for the first time inducted Chinese weaponry and combat operations against India. When you look at the US and Pakistan, yeah, we could talk about all this buzz about critical minerals and crypto and some CT cooperation. But at the end of the day, where are the broader convergences over the long term? Where are the strategic convergences? Yes, I mean, there could be prospects for more trade, especially if the US and Pakistan are able to work out some type of trade deal down the road. But there's just not as much there, so to speak. Whereas if you look at Pakistan and China, I just think that there's a lot driving that partnership, chief among them being shared rivalry with India. But there's just a lot more. And so I think it's important that we not overstate this idea of, Pakistan balancing relations with China and the US and maybe trying to do that. But at the end of the day, there's a pretty strong imbalance, and it's weighted heavily toward Pakistan and China over Pakistan and the US.
For a very keen Pakistan watcher, Michael, how are you reading how Pakistan is managing these relations? Because I'm sure China is looking at what Asim Munir is doing in Washington D.C., what Pakistan intends to do with the United States of America, news of selling rare earth minerals, maybe even giving access to areas that China was eyeing. How do you think Pakistan is balancing the ties between Pakistan and China and Pakistan and the United States of America here?
Yeah, I mean, it has been able to navigate its diplomacy fairly adeptly, I would say, and I would argue that Pakistan has also taken advantage of significant geopolitical changes in the region itself. One of them being the Sheikh Hasina's departure in Bangladesh, which opened up a new opportunity for engagement between Pakistan and Bangladesh. And as you know, recently you had a three-way meeting between Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Chinese officials. And I think that Pakistan has long been looking for ways to partner with China with third countries, which I think would be a sign of Pakistan-China relationship continues to grow. Bangladesh had been a bit hesitant in terms of its commitment to a longer-term trilateral relationship there, but still, I mean, it wants to engage with Pakistan. It wants to engage with China. And Pakistan also has had this very significant relationship with Turkey, which continues to grow. And the fact that Turkish drones were used in the recent conflict between Pakistan and India, used by Pakistan, that I think is significant as well. So, as I said before, for Pakistan, some of these relationships are much deeper than others, but I do think that it's managed to somehow navigate this significant churn and geopolitical turmoil in ways that ensure that it continues to have friends and partners, including, especially important for Pakistan, donors, those willing to supply Pakistan with assistance, whether you're talking about money, loans, or arms.
Right, my final question to you. How do you see Trump's relations now with Prime Minister Modi as opposed to the Pakistani leadership? I would have liked to say Shahbaz Sharif, but let's stick to Field Marshal Asim Munir.
Right, I think that that Trump might be intrigued about the Munir phenomenon, someone that had already been the most powerful figure in Pakistan, and suddenly had become a field marshal, making him seem even more powerful than he already is. And Trump is attracted to power in that regard. So I think that he might have been intrigued by Munir. When it comes to Modi, I mean, we know that Trump and Prime Minister Modi have a good relationship. They've known each other for quite some time, for quite going back to Trump's first term. And even despite the hiccups on the bilateral side, I think that the chemistry between the two leaders, Modi and Trump, should be helpful. I mean, they may not have similar personalities, but they do still appear to have to have made a very strong impression with each other over the years. And assuming that they'll meet perhaps in a few months or whenever the Quad Leader Summit happens in India, that they'll be able to renew that chemistry. And given how much of importance Trump places on personal relations in diplomacy, I think that could be helpful for the relationship more broadly.
Michael Kugelman, thank you so much for joining us on the network.